There are different areas that Auslan interpreters work. For example, education, primary, secondary, tertiary, also early intervention. Also in the legal setting for the courts, for police interviews, for example. In the medical field, there's probably interpreters that work in all different avenues. Somebody who may be suffering from cancer and having cancer treatment, somebody having a baby. Interpreters are sometimes called to interpret for the birth. Also, there are deaf-blind interpreters who use a tactile system, so the hand on top of the hand, using Auslan principles. That's another area. Also in mental health, that's quite an important and vital area where interpreters are used. Conferences, in the arts, at theatre events, also in employment for job interviews, workplace meetings, for example. There's quite a large gamut of arenas in where interpreters are present. Having access to Auslan is really important for the deaf community in times of emergency, and Vic Deaf have been really pushing this so that we can ensure that deaf people get access to timely information. Even though there are captions sometimes on the screen, live captions, sometimes they're unreliable, incorrect spelling of words and instructions, and also deaf people are not always literate in English. So the expectation that they're going to understand it if captions are provided is incorrect. So having that information available on the television and on internet sites is really important. The other thing is that the radio that's accessible to the wider community is not accessible to deaf people. So they can't just switch on the radio and find out the current state of affairs with an emergency event. So Auslan interpreting and television and media exposure to Auslan is something that I think is really important. I think the challenges for interpreters that are working in emergency situations is making sure that the interpreter themselves have fluency in both languages. That's vital to be able to work between the two languages because they are different. Having experience as well, but the challenges themselves are that the languages are very different. So being able to listen and understand what the English is portraying so that we know the meaning and the intent of the message and we get that across very clearly. Having preparation is sometimes an issue for interpreters arriving at something that's just happened. It's an emergency. There may not be any information for anybody. And I think the pressure of being in front of the camera can also be another demand that the interpreter needs to deal with. So there are a few challenges that we're managing. My journey to becoming an interpreter began way back when I was born. I was born to deaf parents and I acquired Auslan, Australian Sign Language, from birth and used that in my family. And I also acquired English simultaneously. I then went for a job at a school where it was the first ever interpreted mainstream school for deaf children to attend. I worked there for a couple of years and I also sat my qualification test through NATI, the National Accreditation Authority for Interpreters and Translators. From there I went on to work at the first interpreter training course. Sometime later I went and studied at Macquarie University in Sydney and I attained my postgraduate diploma and then I also got my master's in interpreting just recently. So that's been my 30-year journey as a practitioner. At Vic Deaf, we have set up a team of interpreters and we've titled that team the Emergency Services Interpreting Team, ESIT for short. That team of interpreters was set up after the awful events of Black Saturday some years ago. There were some deaf people caught up in that tragedy, and it made us rethink how we were going to provide services so that deaf people can access information in their language, in Auslan, when emergencies occur. That team, the ESIT team, comprises of 7 individuals, and they've been selected based on their skill in Auslan and in English, and their interpreting skill, as well as their academic qualifications. Most of them have tertiary level qualifications in interpreting. That team are a dedicated group of volunteers that come together about once a month for professional development opportunities. So what we do is we come together and we might learn the specifics and the terminology to do with floods, for example, or we might have 1 month's PD on issues to do with terrorist threats, just to keep ourselves informed in terms of the current situations that could occur so that we're ready to go when an emergency occurs.